Awesome, thank you. Thanks to Mr. Sturgeon and Ms. Bannock. Before we get into sort of the official rundown of high school English, and with a particular focus in terms of what grade 10 would look like or could look like, or the possibilities, I just wanted to take a quick second to say a big shout out to our administration and our guidance counselors here at the school. And all of our teachers. We work really hard here at Centennial to provide opportunities for students to belong. And we as a school community believe very deeply in that. And it's something we work hard at. It's something that we're not perfect at either, but it is something in the front of our mind. All right, on to the nitty-gritty about English. So I have been here at Centennial for 10 years. I've been a learning leader for about 5 of them. And I'm happy to share some information with you, and then we'll definitely take questions at the end. So the key things I'd like to focus on for our time today is that although high school English is a continuation of what has been done in junior high in some respects, and that is a little bit unlike other curriculums. The curriculum and the program of study specifically, it's the same 5 outcomes from very early in the students' schooling to the very end of their English high school schooling. And the other point of emphasis is it's really important for students and parents to consider where they are at right now, or at least at the end of grade 9, because an effective placement of program will lead to a much better high school experience overall. And lastly, if a student is placed in a course that maybe isn't well suited to them, there are places to cross over and to find their way to success. Next slide, Ms. Bannock. So very quickly, the first bullet there are 6 strands in the English curriculum: listening, speaking, reading, writing, viewing, and representing, and they're paired. And the 5 main general outcomes within the curriculum are explore thoughts, ideas, feelings, and experiences, comprehend literature and other texts in oral, print, visual, and multimedia forms, and respond personally, critically, and creatively. And with GO2, comprehend, the personal, critical, and creative responses, the emphasis varies amongst the different courses. The third GO is to manage ideas and information. Fourth, create oral, print, visual, and multimedia text and enhance the clarity and artistry of communication. And finally, collaborate with, respect, and support others. Next slide, please. So there is a minor but significant change when students move from grade 9 into grade 10, regardless of program. In previous to grade 10, all the GOs are generally weighted equally to each other. However, when students come to grade 10, general outcome 2, which is comprehend, and general outcome 4, which is create, those make up 66% of the student's grade. So not all the 5 GOs are equal to each other. And that's important to know, because I think sometimes in some cases students think, well, I just add my mark up and divide by the number, right? That's how I get my average. And it's not quite like that. Those 2 GOs are weighted more than the remaining 3. Next slide, please. So we'll now take a quick foray into looking at the different courses that are available to students, particularly in grade 10, but also in the grade 11 and 12 years, and looking at the sequencing of those. Next slide, please. Okay, so let's start with the grade 10, the column on the far left, which would be a representation of the the 4 courses that could be taken by an English student. So starting at the top, we have English 10 AP, that's the advanced placement class, and we'll have our AP coordinator, Ms. DeLeon, talking to some more specifics of that a bit later. But realistically, what we're looking for with students there would be in terms of a report card number. And again, this is a general working idea. It's not necessarily an absolute, but we're looking for students that would have mostly 4s. For English 10-1, we would be looking for students that have mostly 3s and 4s. For English 10-2, 2s and 3s. And for 10-4, Miss Wilson is our coordinator for that, and connecting with her and with our admin and guidance team on that would be most appropriate, I think. And then we work our way up from there. Now you can see the dashed arrows are, pardon me, are the possible progressions. So it is possible to go to start in English 10-1 and then go to 20-2 and so forth. It is not, however, a viable or useful crossover to go from, say, English 10-2 straight to English 20-1. That's not recommended. We'll touch on that in a few moments. Next slide, please. So starting the next section, we'll just take a looking at English AP, English 10-1 and English 10-2. We'll just take a general look at this kind of skill sets that students would need to have more or less. And again, these are fairly broad strokes, but hopefully it gives parents and students who are watching a chance to maybe kind of check themselves against these basic benchmarks to see which course might fit best for them. So when we're looking at homework in AP, it's assigned consistently, and usually the homework that's assigned and the driver for the homework is to expand and deepen content. It's not necessarily just do those questions for homework, but it's like, okay, I want you to research Shakespeare's theater, and then we're going to talk about that tomorrow. So that is a little bit different from how homework is derived in other courses, excuse me. As far as reading, AP students should read both challenging and standard texts by themselves. They should be confident readers. And ideally, they've got a strong passion for reading and comfortable with complex stories, and not necessarily just complex stories in terms of the ideas or themes within them, but also complexity within how the story is told. And then they should be able to quickly identify deeper structures in text. As far as critical thinking goes, an AP student should move very confidently between the big picture, what's the big idea in this story, and what are some of the details that get us to that big picture. And finally, for writing, they should write both personal and connected critical paragraphs effectively, and also, because it's AP and it's an advanced course in that sense, they should be able to apply literary analysis to text with support. The one thing I'll touch on with AP just before we move to the next slide is that sometimes students think that AP means more homework, but that's not really the case. The pace is a bit faster, and from an English specific perspective, I expect students to be able to read faster, so we're able to do more literature that way. But it's not about more homework in that sense. Next slide, please. Looking at the English 10-2 skill set now. For homework, this usually only happens in a 10-2 class when there wasn't enough time to complete the work. Maybe a student got distracted, or there was a fun TikTok video today that was just too much of a pull. But usually only in those cases would something need to be taken home and completed. As far as reading goes, a 10-2 student would typically use support to read standard and challenging texts for their course level. They would likely describe themselves as a reluctant reader and would read in a way that would be driven more towards a personal connection, more than for what's the big idea in this story and what are the details in it. As far as critical thinking, 10-2 students need to be able to work well in the big picture, but they might struggle a little bit to sort of come to find and discuss details that lead to that bigger picture. Finally, with writing, and this is one of the key differentiators between -1 and -2 particularly, in -2, most of the paragraphs and the writing is derived from a personal basis, and they only need to write in an essay that's called a literary exploration, which is connected to the diploma exam and how they're assessed in grade 12. A literary exploration is the longest essay they'll write. It's about 4 or 5 paragraphs max. Only one of those paragraphs needs to be on a source that the students have read. Okay, next slide, please. And now we'll transition into English 10-1. So for homework, it's assigned on a consistent basis. And sometimes it'll be, okay, you need to do these few questions for homework, or, you know, you need to read this, you know, this 3 or 4 page article for homework, things of that nature. As far as reading goes, read standard texts independently and challenging texts with support. So the challenging texts here might be perhaps longer texts, or if they're structurally more challenging, like Shakespeare, right? They'll get support. There'll be an audio book. There'll be a movie to watch alongside with that. And then most 10-1 students should generally enjoy reading, and they're able to read strategically with support to identify deeper structures in text. As far as critical thinking goes, they move effectively between the big picture and also finding details that lead to the big picture, even though they might need a little bit of support for that, a little bit of direction. And then contrasting with the writing, thinking back to -2, -2 students only need to be able to write 1 paragraph on a, let's say we've read a story or a novel. I would be asking the students as 1 paragraph in a 4-paragraph essay to have a single paragraph on that source. But in -1, students will write personal paragraphs fairly independently. That should be pretty straightforward for them. But with support, they need to write 3 interconnected paragraphs about a single source. And that is a significant difference and a significant challenge when we're looking at what are the differences between 10-2 and 10-1. Okay, next slide, please. Now we're going to just take a quick moment to talk about crossing over from -2 to -1, because so the question often is asked, so if my son or daughter begins in English 10-2 or ends up being like in English 20-2 in grade 11 or 30-2 in grade 12, they really need English 30-1 in order to get into university. So how can they do that? And here at Centennial, there's a basic crossover point which would exist at many schools, definitely. And then we do have, I'm not going to say we are the only school running this, but we are one of a small handful of schools who are running a specified program. We'll talk about that in just a moment. Next slide, please. So here's our diagram again of our course structures. So if you look at the middle column with the red circle, let's say, for example, a student coming from grade 9 starts in English 10-2. They're successful in English 10-2, and then they go to English 20-2, which is the sort of the standard progression there. If the student in 20-2 is achieving confidently, as in like close to 80 or above 80 in terms of their final grade, then one crossover point, and this is the one that is common in many schools, we would say that a good crossover point would be to go from 20-2 into 20-1 and then go to 30-1. That's one place. Another place is located in our third column with the red circle, and it's in between 30-1 and 30-2. And this is a program that, while maybe not unique in the CBE in its entirety, we run a program here called English 30-1.5. And what happens with that is we take students in English 20-1 who are maybe achieving between 50 and 60, maybe 62, 63. And then we take students who are in English 20-2 who are achieving in the 80s potentially, and we put them together in English 30-1.5. And our amazing English teacher here, Miss Kim, she is a marker on the 30-2 floor. She's taught for 14 years, and she's taught English 30-1 numerous times. And she is the teacher of this course. And English 30-1.5 is a full year English course, but with a difference. In the first term, from September to the end of October, it is a fast track 30-2 class. So she teaches the students the key attributes to be successful in 30-2. They study a few sources, a few texts, and then the students write the 30-2 exam in November. Then from November to June is 30-1 exclusively. And the advantage here for kids who are in that 50 to 62, 63 range in 20-1 or above 80 in 20-2, it allows them more time to build their skills and to develop those skills necessary in order to be successful on the 30-1 diploma exam or in the course in general. So hopefully I explained that in a way that's relatively clear. I know maybe without drawing more diagrams, it might be a little bit challenging, but I am happy to answer any questions about that if they come up. Next slide, please. The final point I just wanted to touch on from an English perspective, and hey, I'm biased, what can I say? I teach English and I'm here to talk about it, so I've drunk the Kool-Aid, but I just wanted to stress reading and literacy's importance. And I would definitely say, no one in the Centennial High School building feels that it's not important. And I would say that probably all the parents here feel it's important, because it's the single most important skill that can improve a student's achievement across any of their classes. But in order to support reading and literacy, we have a free reading program that we do in grade 10 and 11, and some teachers do it in grade 12 as well. We'll read for 20 minutes a day for maybe half the semester, maybe the whole semester, and it allows them to practice their reading skills. It allows them to work on hopefully just loving reading, because the free reading program is about finding a book, whether it's a graphic novel or a fiction, nonfiction, finding something that they're interested in. And just to throw that out to parents, just having your kids read is one of the most effective ways you can help them as a student. And there's lots of different ways to read. Podcasts with long form stories, books on tape, See, I'm old. I called it a book on tape, an audiobook. These things are ways for us to interact with stories. And really, that's English in a high school context is about the human experience and how metaphors and symbols exist in our world and how those create meaning for us as humans. In addition, one of the key foundational skills that English gives kids is being persuasive and building arguments. I joke with my students, they're in English 10-1 so they can convince their parents and 10-2 so they can convince their parents to borrow the car. If they can build a compelling argument, their chances of success increase greatly. And then finally, the power of story in our lives. Stories are how we understand ourselves. And this is true from Greek and Roman times all the way to current stories. And I know I get excited talking about it. I hope that's coming through this video screen right now. And I know all the people in the hallway that are in the English department here at Centennial, they all believe deeply about that and the power that lies in understanding ourselves through story. Okay, as a typical English teacher, I think I've probably babbled on more than long enough, and I'll throw it open to questions. I'm sure Mr. Sturgeon is busy chipping away if there are any.
I do have a couple to read to you, Mr. Hornby, and thank you for that excellent presentation. So I'm going to read the first one and let you respond, then I'll kind of go through. I think there's 3 or 4 that you can probably respond to here. The first one, does English advanced placement mean more essays?
No. It means slightly different kinds of essays. The AP program and the intent within that particular curriculum asks for slightly different ones, but it's not necessarily more. I have been the 10 AP teacher here for the last number of years. I don't assign more essays. The reading, there's more reading to do and it's more challenging, but it's not a situation where I'm going to give a student a novel and say, okay, read this in 3 days and be ready to talk about it. There's time, but I expect them to do it faster.
Thank you. Next question says, what is the difference between a critical paragraph and a personal paragraph?
Excellent question. So a personal paragraph would be if the question was around the difficulty around making choices. A personal paragraph would ask, tell me about a time in your life where you had to make a difficult choice, or tell me about someone in your world that has had to make a difficult choice, or tell me about someone you know in human history that's had to make a difficult choice. A critical paragraph would be, how does, in the novel To Kill a Mockingbird, discuss the details and how in and around the idea about how Atticus Finch has to make a hard decision. So in one, it's based in personal experience, and in a critical paragraph, it's critical in the sense of I'm asking the students to tell me something about a source they've read.
Thank you, Mr. Hornby. There's another one that Ms. DeLeon will probably respond to later as well, but a question was asked about credits, and I answered the question that for English 10 AP and English 10-1, they both result in 5 credits. So the question's asked, what would be the reason for kids to go into advanced placement then? And you've sort of touched on that already, but maybe if you could respond to that as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think two kind of answers to that question. The first answer is, if a student is looking for a raw, practical, I want to try and get credit for university, like university English classes by taking AP English, you can do that. I think a more important reason to take AP would be, I love to read. I love talking about stories and ideas. I love debating things. I love, finding little things in a story that mean a lot. Those are the kinds of, I think, passions, at least from an English perspective, those are the kinds of passions I think that serve a student well in terms of making the choice to register in AP.
Thank you. I think that covers most of those questions, Mr. Hornby.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Look at that. I didn't talk too much, so that's good, because Mr. Pierpoint is an excellent human being, and I would not want to steal any of his time because he's a lot smarter than me. So I think it's good that we started here, because we're going to pass it along to people who get smarter along the way.
Well, those of us who are social studies teachers, Mr. Hornby, appreciate that compliment. So on behalf of Mr. Pierpoint, Mr. Sturgeon here says, thanks for acknowledging our brilliance.
Anytime, anytime, anytime.